Now our main speaker will share her experience, strength, and hope with us. Please join me in welcoming Genie. No, I'm positive.
Hi, good evening. My name is Genie. I'm an alcoholic. So happy to be here. This is like a home group to me. So it's like one of the hardest places it is for me to speak. I have so many people that I love here and so many empty chairs of people who've passed to another meeting in the sky. Somebody said, Genie, that's a price you pay. When you get older, you're going to lose people you love. And I said, I don't care if they start dropping like flies. I'm going to live to be 100. Is that the most selfish thing you ever heard? Thank you, David. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it open?
Yes.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you. Hi, Zoomers. We're the Roomers. Roomers and Zoomers. My name is Genie. I am an alcoholic. I did say that. I was born in 1938, Detroit, Michigan. That's rigorous honesty, 1938. Do the math. I got sober the first time, March 22nd. I came in off the fumes of St. Patty's Day in 1986. But I set my sobriety date back because I took a little hit off of an outside issue. And so I set my sobriety date back, and my new sobriety date is April the 22nd, 1988. So I'm 37 years squeaky clean and sober. That's the good news, squeaky clean. Because if I'm a little dirty any place, you better back a truck up loaded with whatever I'm dirty with, because I'm going to need more. And that's who you got speaking with you tonight. Like I said, I was born in Detroit, Michigan. I was orphaned. I'm going to spin dry through that so I can get to my drinking. I was orphaned. I had an older brother and sister. My mom and dad were being separated in their own home long before I came into this world. He got stationed, got called back into the service because we were going to war at the time. Remember, I was born in 38 when Hitler was coming around. And so he got called back into the service, and that was kind of the separation and the divorce in our family. He dropped my mom, my brother, older brother, and sister, and I off. I was a baby when I was just a baby. And my mom went to Detroit, to the federal building in Detroit to work. We had race riots going on in Detroit in the 40s. And they had guys shipped in from other states to quell the race riots. And she fell in love with one of those guys. And she decided to leave. This was about a year into living with my grandmother and her mom. And so she came home one day to get us kids dressed. She's going to leave with this guy. And my grandmother said, you can go live a life of sin, but you're not taking these 3 beautiful French-Irish Catholic babies with you. She said, you get your head screwed on straight. You can come back and get your children. To this day, I've never laid eyes on my mother. I've never seen my mom. I met my dad when I was about 15 and a half. I was ready to get married, and I stopped by to see my dad, who, when he came back, had all kinds of problems from the war. And so he never did take us kids back in. So we ended up in St. Vincent de Paul, which is a Catholic organization. My family was Catholic, and we were placed in an orphanage at first and then in foster homes. And so we were separated individually at different times. My brother was taken away first, then my sister was taken away. And by the time I was 4.5 years old, I had quit investing in people because I knew you're going to be gone. So let's just have fun while we're here because it ain't going to last very long. And I took that that's probably cute when you're 4, but by the time you're 22 and living that same kind of thought process, because that's what I was like. I was like, let's fall in love real quick because I know it's going to be over soon, and it usually was because I was always looking at their clay feet, I was always looking at what was wrong with them so that I wouldn't miss them so much when we were separated. That was just my mode of living. I didn't know anything different. Gina, who I adore, Gina, I've known Gina ever since she got sober, and Pebbles ever since she got sober. And Jan is a new gal. Sil, I know Sil and Julie. Oh my God, there's so many people that I love in this room. I'm getting nervous. I think I got to tell the truth now. Because it's so much easier to make up a story, isn't it? And it would be so much more romantic. Anyway, so my whole thought in life was I want to grow up, I want to get married, and I want to have a family of my own. Because I never felt that any place I lived was family. And every time I did, I was in 12 different homes before I was 9 years old, which tells you I wasn't a very good little girl. Well, that's what it told me. It told me I wasn't a very good little girl, because every time I did something wrong in your house, they'd say, you do that again, you're going back to the home. So every time I went back to the home, I knew it was something I did. And they didn't catch me at half the shit I did. So I knew I was really bad. They just thought I was a little bit bad, but I was really bad. And so I grew up with that thought process that I'm not a very good little girl. I was very smart in school, so I made good classes without even trying. I looked okay, so I fit in. I was an athlete, so I loved playing baseball and all that kind of stuff. But at 12 years old, everything changed. I'm living in this German household. People were right from Germany, the mother and father, my mother and father. But this was about the 9th home I'd lived in. And they used to make their own wine in their own cider, apple cider. So before I got a chance to drink that apple cider, we smoked, the boys made a corncob pipe, and they put corn silk, dried corn silk in it, and they smoked it. And I thought, gosh, when people smoke, they always calm down. They always seemed a little calmer. When guys have a big cigar, they always felt a little calmer. So I thought, oh, this will calm me down, because I was wild. And so I took a hit off of that, and I thought, boy, this is nirvana. I don't think it did anything to me, but my head told me it was going to do something to me, and that's all I need. I live up in here. And so that was the first thing I did to get high. Then I tasted apple cider, which was hard apple cider, meaning it's already fermented and got alcohol in it. And so they gave me a little cup, paper cup. The boys had it. And by the time I got my drink, it was soggy, because they'd all had theirs drink first, 3 or 4 boys that lived there. And so I took mine, and it was already leaking. So I just put my head under that spick, and I just turned that spick on, and I just drank right from the barrel. That's how my drinking started. Forget that little shot glass. The barrel is good enough for me. And that's what I took into my drinking, too. So now I'm living happily ever after. I'm about 15 and a half years old. My girlfriend's uncle signed me out of St. Vincent de Paul so that I could be her lower companion, because her mom was an alcoholic. She had an older brother and sister, and she could do anything she wanted. She was raised by wolves, and so she could do anything she wanted, and I could never do everything she wanted to do, because I couldn't get out of this foster home that I was living in to go play. So her uncle signed me out of St. Vincent de Paul so that we could hitchhike to Memphis, Michigan. I wish it was Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis was still alive, So we'd hitchhike, we'd drink beer with the boys, we'd do whatever we could do just to have fun, because there's nothing to do in Emmett, Michigan, where I lived. Absolutely nothing. There was a hotel, which was really just a bar, and there were like 3 bars and a post office, and that was the town. So we rode around, we threw empty bottles at Stein's, we set hay bales on fire and then pulled it across the road when you came driving down the road, so you'd go off the road, go into the ditch, and we'd all scatter. I mean, this is the kind of entertainment we had. So all I want to do is marry that first guy that asked me. And my girlfriend's uncle had signed me out of St. Vincent de Paul. I'm living with my girlfriend and her mom, who's alcoholic, Zeta Burns. And she's whispering in the kitchen, you got to get rid of her. I can't afford to take care of the kids of my own, let alone bring another ragamuffin in here. That was me. And so I heard all that in the kitchen. I thought, I got to get a job. So they gave me a job. I got a work permit. I wasn't quite 16. I got a work permit that said I was 16, and I was worked at a Cadillac where they made the back of the mirror, and I had to buzz the back of that mirror, all that metal off of it, so that it was nice and smooth, and it was piecework. And so, but I got a little problem, a little physical problem, and so I had to go to the hospital. It wasn't working. This job thing wasn't working, and this living condition wasn't working. So they moved me in with her, Zita's son's girlfriend, Mary. She lived in Port Huron, Michigan. I'm moving to Port Huron. Port Huron was the metropolis. It was like 35,000 people at the time, you know. That was a metropolis to me. So I moved to Port Huron, Michigan. I got a job at Coney Island Hot Dogs, and hot dogs were 30 cents a piece then, and I could line them up on my arm, Coney Islands, and put that chili sauce on them 2 at a time, deal them out like cards. And one day this hymn came in. Jan, you know about those hymns. And he came in, he was tall, dark, and how can I tell you this story? Because my sponsor made me write about this. When I finally got to AA, she said, Genie, you were 16 years old. You weren't even old enough in the state of Michigan to get married, and you married this guy. Were you ever in love? And I thought about it. God, did I love him? It was like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. That's how I lived my life. And I said, she said, don't tell me now. She says, you go home and write about it, Charlotta Wyman. So I went home and I started writing. He was tall, dark, and handsome. Well, he was only dark and handsome, but 2 out of 3 aren't bad. And he came from Ohio. Ohio, how exotic is that? I'm going to travel. And he would wait for my station. He liked me so much that even if you had a empty table at your station, he waited to sit at my station. So I knew he liked me more than I liked him. And I said, and then I said, well, another thing I wrote was he didn't have any anger issues. You know, I'd lived in a lot of homes where the men were slamming doors. You had to watch who you sat next to, you know, to make sure you were safe kind of thing. You had to always dress, you know, so nobody could see anything. And so I was always worried about protecting myself, you know, which today I know it is self-obsession, which I was riddled with self-obsession and safety. And so she said, well, how did you know he didn't have any anger issues? And I said, well, I had read this article in a romance magazine, you know, the kind you used to have to hide under the mattress. And it said that this lady created a Caesar salad for her lover. And the Caesar salad had aroma and consistency and essence, and because it had anchovies in it. And I thought, anchovy, that must be some kind of a rare vegetable that I've never heard of. I'm from Michigan. We put vegetables in our salad, you know. So one day he asked me to go to the drive-in, one of our first dates. And he asked me to go to the drive-in, and of course I said yes, because I knew he liked me more than I liked him. And I also said yes because he told me he worked at the post office. The post office, people that worked at the post office, their kids came to school better dressed. They had new shoes every semester. He works at the post office, the perfect man for my babies, the perfect father. So we go to the drive-in. He stops at a little liquor store, or a little market, really, because when you go to the drive-in, they have a snack bar, but everything is very expensive at the snack bar, he informed me. And he said, this is a way of saving money. We'll go to this. So he's there buying Slim Jims and potato chips and that kind of stuff you would eat at the, you know, at the drive-in. And I'm over looking at the anchovies. And I find them. And I say, oh, my God, anchovies. And so he comes over, and they're not just regular anchovies. They came from Portugal. Anchovies from Portugal, my God, I wonder what it is. And so he comes over to me and he said, do you see anything you want? And I said, well, they have anchovies here. And he goes, well, how much are they? And I said, well, they're 10 cents a can. And he said, get 2. Well, there's my man, anchovies in a backup. And so we go to the drive-in, but I already have the ism. I don't have the alcohol so much yet because I haven't had availability. But I try to open this can of anchovies, and I'm having a problem with the key. And he said, "Don't worry about it, doll. Reach in my glove compartment there. I got a little tool that'll help take care of that problem." And so I hand him the little tool and the anchovies, and while he's driving his 1942 Plymouth, he tries to open this anchovies, and the sun was glistening and the car was moving, and he thought they were moving, and he hands them back to me real quick. He goes, "What are these?" And I'm looking, I think it's moving, and we throw them out the window. But in the meantime, the whole place is smattered with the anchovy juice. But does that bother him? No way. He hugged and kissed me and cuddled me through that whole movie. He didn't care that I smelled like a dead fish. That's my guy. That's the kind of man I want. And so sure enough, 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. He took me across the state line because I wasn't old enough in the state of Michigan to get married. We went to Angola, Indiana. We was married by Judge Mudge. I should have saw a sign right there. But the judge, while we were filling out the paperwork, I saw on his side of the paperwork, it said something about Phyllis Lane. My husband's name was Bert Lane. I saw Phyllis Lane, and I said, "Well, who's this Phyllis?" "Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it on the way home." So I filled out my paperwork, and away we went. The judge married us. On the way home, I asked him about this Phyllis Lane. It was his first wife. I went, "Oh. Well, thank God I didn't get married in the Catholic Church." My first major decision in life was the only thing I had constant my whole life was Catholicism. That Catholic Church was sort of my haven. So I kind of turned my back on the Catholic Church and on that God of my understanding. And I kind of went with whatever goes, you know. So we get married. We have my first baby December 27th, 1957 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. My second baby is born because he went back into the service because he couldn't get a job. When I found out, one day he comes home, we got this little tiny apartment, and I'm cooking, and I'm making baked beans and Spam. He loves Spam, but he likes it crispy, so I'm baking it, and I'm putting a little grape jelly on it when I really feel gourmet, you know. So I'm baking this Spam, and he comes in from the post office, and he said, "Guess what?" "Well, you know me, I love surprises." I go, "What?" He said, "The job at the post office is finished." I went, "Finished? What about that wind, rain, sleet, and snow shit?" "Finished? How can it be finished?" You know, it's a career. It's not just a job. Well, the job, he had failed to tell me he was painting the post office, and he and his crew were going back to Ohio, which he could not find work in Ohio. We ended up in North Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina. He'd been in the 82nd Airborne before, and he re-enlisted, and he got big bucks for re-enlisting. So we had our first baby boy born there on December 27th, 57. December 28th, 58, I had my second baby born in Germany, Heidelberg, Germany. He'd been transferred to the 101st. And in 1960, we missed 59 by 2 months. 1960, we brought our third baby into the world. By this time, I could not stand him. I knew where these babies were coming from. He had a little tuft of hair that he never quite shaved, and we'd be riding, and I'd see that little tuft of hair, and it just pissed me off. And I used to say, someday I'm going to lay him down and shave that tuft of hair so I never have to look at it again. By the time I came back to the United States, I wanted to take a melon baller and get that tuft of hair out of there, the big scoop of his flesh. So I knew it was probably time we separated. He brought me back to the United States. My girlfriend's uncle had signed me out of St. Vincent de Paul, let me rent this house that he'd created for one of his nieces. She had married and moved away, so I got to rent that little house. I've got that allotment check coming in. I go to the post office or my mailbox, and that allotment check is there every month. I look back at that time. It's really the best time of my life. I got my 3 babies. I don't have to worry about that guy coming home. He hates me. I hate him. He talks out of the side of his mouth to me. I answer out of the other side of my mouth to him. We never look directly at each other. One day I go out there to get that allotment check. It's not there. 3 months later, the kids and I are literally starving, and I'm seeing my children lose weight in front of my eyes. I finally get in touch with the Red Cross. I finally get in touch with Father Farrell. I remembered I was Catholic all of a sudden. Father Farrell helped me with money. My girlfriends who lived next door to me helped me with money. But how much can you give a family of three children? Everybody was starting to close their blinds when my blinds were opened, and when I'd get up in the morning. And so finally I got a chance to get in touch with this husband. One of the first things that happened while I was there in that starvation mode, one day there was a knock on my door, and I thought it's probably a bill collector. Maybe it's our judge, my girlfriend's uncle looking for the rent. I have no money. I finally peeked through the blinds, because that's what we do. God forbid we should just be open and honest. And I peeked through the blinds, and I see these three beautiful people, and they have boxes in front of them. I figured there's some kind of salespeople. No, they were people from the next town over, Memphis, Michigan, where my girlfriend and I used to hitchhike. And they had heard that there was a family in trouble. They were church people. They'd heard there was a family in trouble. Well, where I come from, I was on the dole my whole life. I'd been on the dole. I was on a charity case my whole life. And so here I am putting my kids through this. When I opened the door, it was like not relief, thank God somebody's helping me. It was like my pride and my guilt from not being a good mother, and for all these things that I've been thinking about myself. I'm not a good mother, can't take care of my kids. I don't have an education. I've only got 11th grade education. I should not have children, all these things. I opened the door, and these people saw how I was not reacting the right way, and they kind of backed away. They could see that I felt bad about what I was taking. And so they kind of backed away. And the kids and I brought that stuff in the house. We danced around it. They had their first big meal in a long time, and sandwiches after kind of thing. And 3 days later, there was another knock on the door. And this time I opened the door, and there were three people looking like the ones that had been there 3 days ago. And I thought to myself, what do they think? I had that, what they talk about in the big book, that righteous indignation. What do they think? We're some kind of gluttons here? That was my attitude. And they were from ADC, Aid to Dependent Children, and they were there to take my children that day because they'd heard that there was a family in trouble and that we were literally starving. And so they didn't wait to be invited into my home. They passed me and went into. The guy went into the kitchen, and the two women stood there, and they said things to me like, we'll get you an education. We'll put your children in foster homes. You can go back to school, get an education. When I heard the word foster homes, my ears closed up. My head swelled up. My face got beet red. I could see their lips moving, but I really couldn't understand what they were saying because I was still thinking that foster home stuff and what am I doing to my kids. When the guy comes out of the kitchen and he said, we cannot take our children today. And they said, well, why not? The ladies, we're ready. Why not? And he said, her kitchen is filled with food. God had done for me what I couldn't do for myself in that one moment. 3 days later, my husband came across country. I finally found out he had gotten an early discharge. They called it a hardship discharge. They couldn't find him at first. Finally, the Red Cross got in touch with him because of our dire situation in the place that we were. He came across and he got my kids. And I must tell you that he offered to take me too. But I looked at him and I thought, I went across country with him once and I'm never doing that again. I put my kids and all their belongings in that house, in that car with my son, my husband, almost called him my son, my husband, and waved goodbye to my kids, because my thought is, I'll get a good job, I'll get enough money, I'll have my own car, my own apartment, I'll come and get my kids. But 4 years went by. I went back and forth to see those kids for the next 4 years. Every chance I got. I worked at my girlfriend's uncle's bar, the Satellite Lounge. It's still there in Port Huron, Michigan. Anybody ever wants to visit? Right next door to that post office that my husband painted. And so I'm working as a hostess there, and the guy comes in. I'm back and forth seeing my kids. Every time I go to see them, I need a little something bigger and better with me. I'm drinking 24 hours a day because I don't have those kids with me. If you're dating me, you better know In-N-Out. We didn't have In-N-Out burgers then, but don't take me to Coney Island. I want to go to a fine restaurant. If you buy me a purse, you better get me that Prada or that Chanel or that whatever. I just needed bigger and better things to distract me. I don't have my kids with me. I need something bigger and better to know that I'm okay. And it all is outside fixes, every bit of it. I'm drinking around the clock. I'm smoking a little dope if I can find it. I'm taking these little whites. I thought they were diet pills. Today I find out that it's speed, but I didn't know that then. I take 2 of those, clean my house, get on that Greyhound bus, go away for 3 days to visit my kids. And every time I go to visit them, I promise next time Mommy comes, Mommy's going to take you with her. The next time I come, I'm going to have everything I need for us to be together the next time. But every time I got on that Greyhound bus, I knew this wasn't going to be the next time. I knew I was going to lie to my kids one more time and lie to myself one more time. One day I come back home from visiting my kids. It was the last time I went to visit them. I got on the bus, I cleaned my house for 2 days, I worked 2 shifts so that I could be off for 3 days in a row. I got on that Greyhound bus. There was a guitar player sitting in the back, a cute guy, long blonde hair. He didn't have a shirt on, and he had no hair on his chest. I had never seen a man with no hair on his chest. And I thought, oh my God, and he's giving me that look. And I went, oh yeah, I know that look. And I'm thinking, I have no makeup on, but I'm dressed lovely. And I thought, I'll go put my makeup on, and this guy will not have a chance. I'll be marrying him by the time we get to Oklahoma. So now I go into that lounge and I've got a big bottle of Southern Comfort in my purse, and I'm sipping on that Southern Comfort. I've had those whites that I've been taking for 2 days, and I'm sipping on that Southern Comfort, and I'm putting on my eyebrows and my eyelashes and putting that lipstick on, thinking about, what should I say first to him, or what's he going to say to me? I have this whole storyline. By the time I get done, I go out there, that bus is long gone. So is my future husband and father of my children, long gone. And I sit there for the next 2 shifts of people in that bar, because what are you going to do? What would you do if your, bus is gone and there's a big sign that says lounge? I go into that lounge and I put $5 on the bar. I work in a bar. I know how to treat a bartender. I put that $5 on the bar. Please make sure I get on that next Greyhound bus that leaves. I fell in love 3 times on those 2 shifts that I went through, and they were glad to put me on that bus. They physically put me on that bus. I get to Kansas City, Missouri, which is where we're going, and which is where my stop is. And my husband is there. He's been there two times before to miss 2 buses, because I missed 2 buses. And I have no idea where my luggage is. I've got this green dress on, but I got full makeup on that I haven't cried off, because I was one of those unattended women in the bar. I went through every kind of emotion while I sat there and drank. I reminisced, I talked, and then I talked about my children, and then I started crying, and then I fell in love, and I was high as a kite, and the world was spinning around again, and everything is good. That's the kind of drinking I did. So I fall out of the bus, literally fall out of the bus. My husband is there. This is the guy that talks out of the side of his mouth to me. He picks me up, and he looks me straight in the face, and he said, Genie, I don't know what you're doing to yourself, girl, but every time you come, there's a little less of you. And he's looking straight at me. He's piercing that part of me that you guys pierced when I got you. He broke through that wall that I have. He looked at me kind of lovingly, or sympathetic. I don't know what the look was. I'd never seen that look on his face before. And he kind of shook me a little bit. He said, I cannot bring our children to you looking like this. He said, I'll put you in a motel. You stay there, take a shower. I'll bring the kids to you tomorrow. So he puts me in this motel. I sleep through the next day because I'm wasted and I'm out of it. And I guess he came and knocked, but I didn't answer. The next day he comes. By this time I'm up and showered and have spot cleaned that green dress that I have on. And I'm looking presentable, but I'm hungover. And I hear his car pull up, and when I opened the door, Bert was there. Carla, the girl he'd sent back to Germany with that he'd been seeing, is sitting in the front seat. My kids are sitting in the back seat. She's sitting in my seat. And I'm thinking, and he comes in with a briefcase, and he puts this he said, Jeannie, sit down. There was a little round circular table in that motel room, and he said, sit here, and he brought out this briefcase and this paperwork, and had a seal from a judge that if I signed these papers, I'd be signing my children over to him and Carla. And he promised me, Jeannie, if you do this, we'll take care of your children. You can come and see them anytime you want. You can take them as long as you're not drinking. As long as you're not drinking and you're not using, you can come and visit the kids anytime. I signed that paper. I'd like to tell you that I went to every court in the country and fought for my children, but for the truth of the matter is, when he said that to me, it was like a sense of relief. I'm not going to have to suit up and show up and be that mother that I haven't been good at. I'm not going to have to do what I thought I had to do from day one. Thank you. You know, I actually was relieved. There was a part of my heart that was broken because of it, but there was a part of my heart that said, that they talk about in the big book, I closed the door on that part of my past. From then on, if you said, Jeannie, have you ever been married? I'd say, yes. Do you have children? I'd say, no. I denied my kids for the next 14 years till I got to you, till I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Everybody that knew me, I babysat your kids. I was godmother to your children. I had a lot of love to give, but I had no place to give it, so I gave it to your kids and to my cat. But this is who you have speaking to you tonight. I was a beaten, worn down woman, and it was all because of alcohol and my idea of who I was. I always had a facade. You never saw the real me. You know, I tell you that I lived in Germany, that I was going to school, Heidelberg University. You know, that's who I pretended to be. I was always pretending to be something that I wasn't. So when you loved me, I could never feel it, because if you only knew. When you looked at me lovingly, my thought would be, if you only knew who I was, you wouldn't be looking at me like that. So I could never receive the love. I could give it, but I couldn't feel it and get it back. So that tells you what my love life was like. I married again, Mike Timms. This is long after, several years after. I came back to Port Huron. I'm working for my girlfriend's uncle. I'm seating you when you come in. You know, we're 1 mile from Canada. 11 o'clock at night, all the Canadians come over to drink beer at our bar, the Satellite Lounge. And George Joseph owns a bar down the street. He comes in to me one night and he said, Jeannie, he comes in every night and he counts how many people we have opposed to how many his bar has. And he said, Jeannie, he said, I don't know what you're doing in this town, but you're never going to make enough money to go get your children. He doesn't know I've signed my children. Nobody knows I've signed my children away. And he said, you know, I hear they're opening a Playboy club down in Detroit. He said, you're cute enough, you could be that. You could go there. And I said, well, what is that? He said, I don't know what it is. But he said, the girls that are working in those clubs, that Playboy club, there was one in Chicago at the time. The girls that work at that Chicago Playboy club are making more money than the guys that are working in the factories down in Detroit. I went, oh my God, money. You know, that's what I need. I need money to fix all my problems. And I said, George, I could barely afford my rent here. I can't afford to go to Detroit. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Don't we love that language? I go, what? He said, I'm going to give you the money to go down and apply at Playboy. I'll give you $200 to sustain yourself for 2 or 3 days. If you make it at Playboy, you can come home. If you make it at Playboy, you pay me back. If you don't make it at Playboy, you come back. If Jerry Kiesler doesn't hire you for this bar, I'll hire you at my bar. What do I have to lose? I get on that Greyhound bus. I go down to Detroit. Sure enough, I get hired. How did I get hired? Because the bartender who came from a task force in Chicago came to the door to open. The regular girl that would have pressed the buzzer to let me in was on her lunch break. So this guy from Chicago, who was a bartender on a task force to open the new Detroit Playboy Club, opened the door for me. And he took me past a room full of this. Were filled with girls from all over the country trying to apply for Playboy because everybody was just excited about Playboy coming to Detroit. They had real fur coats on. We wore real fur back in the day. They had lashes that looked like awnings. They had hooker hose with seams up the back. I could smell the French perfume as he brought me down the stairs into this room, and I saw these gorgeous women. I had a little white straight coat on. I wanted to be a hippie because I remember that guy. I saw that blonde guy, and I had bangs like this, straight long hair, because I wanted to be a hippie, but I couldn't because I had 3 kids when the hippie days were happening. And so he opened the door and he said, "Who are you?" And I said, "My name is Genie." And he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Port Huron," because nobody knows Emmett, even in Michigan. And I said, "Port Huron, Michigan." And he goes, "Port Huron, Genie, come with me." He said, "What are you here for?" I said, "I want to be a Playboy bunny." He took me by the hand, took me up these stairs, down these other stairs, into Claire, past all these beautiful women from all over the world, threw me into Clara Elias's office, and she gave me some paperwork to fill out. They put a little costume on me to see what my legs looked like, and it was like a cow thing, And I lied through the whole process. They said, "What was the last book you read?" Well, I'd been in Germany. I said Mein Kampf because I wanted to sound smart. What are your hobbies? I love to play tennis. Never saw a tennis racket, let alone hold one. What do you like to do for your days off? Oh, I love to go horseback riding. The only horses I'd ever been on were Bonnie and Queenie, the horses, the plow horses that we had. You had to feed them and tie them up in their stall just to get on them. And so, but horseback riding, I lied through the whole thing. And all the girls later on told me they thought I was so sophisticated because I told them I went to the University of Heidelberg. That's what I was doing in Germany. I found out later, much later. So now I'm hired at Playboy, I go back home, I give that money to George Joseph. I travel the world. I worked for 11 years for Hef. It was exactly what I needed. It saved my life before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. The only reason I quit Playboy was because I came out here. I transferred out here. Playboy had a little fire, and they had to lay off girls that were already working here, so I could either go back to Chicago or Detroit, my bunny mother told me. But it was March, and I hadn't seen Disneyland yet, so I decided to stay out here. She got me a job at the Ambassador Hotel, and I drank and used the way I wanted. I used everything, people, places, things, parties, anything to distract me from not having my kids. And the more you drink, the more you need. And I would set aside days for my drinking because I had to look good even in my job. I'm now working at Marriott Hotel. My bartender happens to live next door to me. We live 1836 Strand in Hermosa Beach at the time. She'd knock on our common wall. That tells me, "Jackie must want to go out drinking tonight." Jay, her husband, Jay Stinnett, must be going to one of those AA meetings, So when she knocks on that door, I go, start putting my makeup on. Jackie and I go out drinking every night. We come home 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. We don't care if we wake up that alcoholic. He's 10 years sober. So this is how I got to you. One day she comes in. She's drinking with me every night. One day she comes into the service area where I work. I hadn't seen her in about 10 days. And I said, "Jackie, where have you been?" And she said, "Oh, I went down to Mexico." She said, I did a little dry out period. I said, "Dry out from what?" She was a lightweight. She drank beer out of those long neck bottles. I'm drinking bowls full of Southern Comfort on crushed ice, "What are you drying out from?" She said, from my booze. Coronas. You drink Coronas with, It doesn't matter. I'm an alcoholic. I know I'm an alcoholic. My sponsor in Al-Anon sent me to AA. That's how bad I am. I went, oh my God. I had to go have a drink out of this margarita I got going on in a bus pan over in the service area just to talk to her about her going to AA. Wipe the salt off. So, "Jackie, what about this AA shit?" She said, "Oh," I said, "Well, you can go to those meetings. I'm not ready." She says, "Oh, don't come till you're ready." She said, "They got shit hanging on the walls. They got bumper stickers. They got a language there. They got a book. They got a big book." I went, "Oh my, how big is it? Will it fit in my Volkswagen?" You know, I can't even believe she was such a lightweight. If she's in AA, what does that say about me? My God, I had to go have another drink out of that margarita. You know, but that's how I got to you. One drunken woman helping another. You know, she reached down there in the doldrums that I was, in the darkness that I was, and pulled me up to the sunlight of the Spirit. I believe in divine intervention. I believe the minute you walk, this is the good news. I believe the minute that you walk in that door, you're stepping on a spiritual path when you come to us. And that path is going to take you just like that thing at the airport. It's going to take you and your baggage, you know, to your destination. Who knows what our destination is? You know, I'm 37 years squeaky clean and sober. My sons got back in touch. I didn't come here to get my kids back. I didn't think I deserved to have them back because I was never going to darken their doorstep again. But guess what? When you do the little bit of work they tell you to do here, I did that 9th step. I had to write that 9th step letter to my 3 sons. And I wrote things like, if you only want to come and see me out of curiosity, I'm available to you. What else can I give them? I had nothing to give them except who I was. And so I wrote all these things about what kind of life I'd lived, and that I tried to be a good woman, and, you know, that I did take care of myself constantly and thoroughly. And then now I'm in AA, and I'm trying to live a bigger and better life. In 2 years sober, my sons got back in touch with me. You know, for 37 years, they've had a mother in their life, a woman that you made out of me, a woman that I can be proud of today, a woman like Gina said in her talk, you know, I've been remolded. I truly believe in divine intervention. I read that part in the big book, A, B, and C, God could and would if he were sought. I looked up at that God of my understanding, and I had what they talk about, a spiritual eclipse, like I was rocketed to the 4th dimension knowing that God was in my life and that he was going to be there. And it all came from that big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the same big book that you guys have. You have transformed me into the woman. You know, I've lived a totally different life after I got here. My sponsor said, poor little orphan girl, didn't have an education, go back to school. You know, I have 9 grandchildren. They've never seen their grandmother have a cocktail. They think I'm the white angel. I have a thing on that my grandson, my oldest grandson, just sent me the other day. Grandma, Genie, I don't tell you this very often, but since you've come into my life is richer and fuller because of you. He was like 7 years old when I came to him. He was already 7 years old when he met me. That was my youngest son, who knew me the least, who waited 15 years. I was 15 years sober when he came back into my life. I always knew he was on his way to me, though, because he worked for the Marriott. He worked as in American Airlines. I thought God's bringing him closer. I always had faith. And then, of course, his 2 brothers talked about me, you know, and said what a lovely woman that they have met. Those kids are part of my life today, and I just got back from Hawaii. I did the little bit of work that you guys told me to do here in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's reshaped my life. It's reshaped generations of my children now and my great-grandchildren. I just have 2 great-granddaughters, you know, the first girls in our family. I have 1 granddaughter, and now I have 2 great-granddaughters. None of them have ever seen me have a cocktail. I thank you for that. And I thank you because for the first time in my life, I feel safely held in these rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
Beautiful, honey.